The scream tore through the mansion like a knife. Nia's hands froze mid-fold, the silk pillowcase slipping from her fingers. She'd been working in the laundry room for 3 hours straight. Her shift didn't end until 2 in the morning, but that sound made her blood stop cold. Footsteps. Fast. Getting closer. The door slammed open. A little girl stood there, barefoot, nightgown twisted, blonde hair wild around her face. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Her chest heaved like she'd been running for her life. "Please help my mum." The words came out broken, desperate. "They're killing her." Nia's stomach dropped. She knew this child. Elsie Harrington, 7 years old. The billionaire's daughter. The one who smiled at her in hallways when no one else even looked her way. Elsie what? "They're hurting her." Elsie grabbed Nia's wrist, pulling hard. "Please. You have to stop them." Nia's mind raced. Mrs. Harrington, Victoria, was upstairs in the East Wing. She'd seen her earlier tonight, looking pale, shaky. The staff whispered she'd been sick for weeks. But killing her? That couldn't be real. Could it? Who's hurting her? Nia knelt down, gripping Elsie's shoulders. "Sweetheart, tell me exactly what you saw." "The men in black. They came into her room. I heard her screaming. I tried to open the door, but it's locked. Daddy told them to." Her voice cracked. "Daddy told them to make her quiet." Ice flooded Nia's veins. Conrad Harrington. The man who owned half the city. The man who paid her $70 a day to scrub floors in a house worth $200 million. The man everyone called untouchable. She wanted to tell Elsie she was confused, that she'd had a nightmare, that rich people didn't hurt each other behind closed doors. But Nia had seen things in this house, heard things. The way Conrad spoke to his wife like she was dirt. The bruises Victoria tried to hide under long sleeves. The nights when raised voices echoed through marble hallways and staff were told to turn up the music, keep walking, mind their business. Money didn't make monsters disappear. It just gave them bigger houses to hide in. "Show me," Nia said. They ran. Through the kitchen. Past the grand staircase. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. Her uniform stuck to her back with sweat. Elsie's small hand squeezed hers so tight it hurt. The east wing stretched ahead, long, dark, lined with paintings worth more than Nia would make in 10 lifetimes. Soft lighting cast shadows that looked like they were moving. The carpet swallowed their footsteps. Then Nia heard it. A muffled cry. Desperate. Fading. Her stomach twisted into knots. This was real. This was happening. And if she walked away now, if she pretended she didn't hear it, Victoria Harrington might not see tomorrow. But what could she do? She was a maid. A nobody. Conrad Harrington could destroy her with a single phone call. He could make her disappear, and no one would ask questions. Elsie looked up at her, eyes wide and terrified. "You promised you'd help people. You said that. Remember?" Nia did remember. Last month, Elsie had found an injured bird in the garden. Nia had wrapped it in a towel, set its wing, watched it fly away 3 days later. Elsie had hugged her and said, "You're the kindest person I know." Kindness didn't pay rent. Kindness didn't protect you from powerful men. But turning away from a woman being hurt, from a child begging for help, that wasn't something Nia could live with. She squeezed Elsie's hand. "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound." They moved closer to the double doors at the end of the hall. Shadows shifted underneath. Voices murmured, low, controlled, wrong. If you believe no amount of money should place someone above the law, hit subscribe. Trolls protect evil. We stand for truth. Nia reached for the door handle. It was locked. Nia pressed her ear against the cold wood. Inside, a man's voice rumbled, calm, professional, terrifying in its steadiness. "Hold her down. Keep the pillow over her face until she stops moving." Nia's blood turned to ice. Another voice. Deeper. "She's fighting hard." Then use more pressure. Conrad wants this done before sunrise. Make it look natural. Heart failure. Understood. Elsie whimpered behind her. Nia spun around, pulled the girl close, covered her mouth gently. Shoo. I've got this. But she didn't. Not really. Think. Her phone sat useless in her locker 3 floors down. No security cameras in the family wing. Conrad had them removed last year for privacy. The nearest staff quarters were empty. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. She was alone. A black woman in a white billionaire's house, about to accuse him of attempted murder. If she was wrong, she'd lose everything. If she was right and did nothing, she'd lose herself. Nia made her choice. She slammed her fist against the door. Security. Open up. Fire alarm's been triggered in the East Wing. Silence. Then footsteps. Fast. Heavy. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. A man in a black suit filled the doorway, tall, built like a wall, face blank. He wasn't regular security. Nia knew every guard who worked this estate. This man was a stranger. Who are you? She demanded, forcing her voice steady. Where's Mrs. Harrington? Staff aren't allowed in the family wing after midnight. His tone was flat. Final. Go back to your station. The little girl said her mother's in trouble. I'm checking on her. Now move. He didn't budge. Behind him, Nia caught a glimpse. Another man in black standing over the bed. Victoria's pale arm dangling off the edge, motionless. A pillow clutched in gloved hands. Rage exploded in Nia's chest. She shoved past the guard. He grabbed her arm, yanked her back hard. Pain shot through her shoulder. Elsie screamed. Let her go. The child's voice cut through the darkness like a siren. The guard's grip loosened for half a second. That was all Nia needed. She drove her elbow into his ribs, twisted free, lunged for the door. The second man dropped the pillow and rushed toward her. Victoria gasped a horrible, wet, choking sound and rolled to her side, coughing violently. She was alive. Barely. Nia didn't think. She grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the hall table and swung it with everything she had. It connected with the second man's temple. He stumbled, crashed into the dresser. Glass shattered. Perfume bottles exploded across marble. The first guard grabbed Nia from behind, locked his arm around her throat. She kicked, clawed, couldn't breathe. Then lights flooded the hallway. What the hell is going on here? Conrad Harrington stood at the end of the corridor, silk robe tied at his waist, expression carved from stone. Behind him, 3 more guards appeared, real ones this time, faces Nia recognized. The man choking her released his grip. She collapsed to her knees, gasping. Elsie ran to her father. Daddy, those men were hurting Mummy. Nia saved her. Conrad's eyes locked on Nia. Cold. Calculating. A predator deciding whether to strike or wait. Is that so? His voice was silk over steel. He stepped into the room, glanced at his wife, still coughing, clutching her chest. Then at the 2 men in black. Gentlemen, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. And Nia's heart sank. Because she'd just figured out the truth. Conrad wasn't surprised. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't anything. He'd orchestrated this. Daddy, tell them to stop. Elsie clung to Conrad's robe, looking up at him with desperate eyes. Tell them Nia's telling the truth. Conrad placed a hand on his daughter's head. Gentle, paternal, sickening. Of course she is, sweetheart. But sometimes people get confused. Especially when they've been working such long hours. His gaze slid to Nia like a blade. Isn't that right? You've been exhausted lately. Seeing things that aren't really there. Nia pushed herself to her feet, legs shaking. Her throat burned where the guard had choked her. Your wife almost died. Those men tried to suffocate her with a pillow. I saw it. My wife has severe anxiety attacks. Conrad's voice remained calm, practiced. Her doctors prescribed sedatives. Sometimes she stops breathing in her sleep. These gentlemen are private medical staff I hired to monitor her overnight. He gestured to the two men in black. You assaulted them while they were trying to help her. It was perfect. Every word calculated. Every lie wrapped in just enough truth to sound believable. Victoria sat up in bed now, breathing ragged. Mascara smeared down her cheeks. Her eyes met Nia's, terrified, pleading, trapped. Say something, Nia thought desperately. Tell them what really happened. But Victoria's gaze dropped to her lap. Her hands twisted the blanket. And she said nothing. Because speaking up meant becoming the next target. Because Conrad owned everything. Her home, her money, her daughter's future. Because women in gilded cages learned long ago that silence kept them breathing. Nia felt the floor tilt beneath her. I want her removed from the property immediately, Conrad continued, addressing the real guards now. And I want a full investigation into how someone this unstable was hired to work around my family. No. Elsie broke free from her father, ran to Nia, wrapped her small arms around her waist. She saved Mummy. She's not lying. Elsie, go back to bed. Conrad's tone hardened. Now. I won't. You're being mean, and... Enough. One word. Ice cold. Final. Elsie flinched like she'd been slapped. Nia knelt down, gently untangled the girl's arms. Hey, look at me. She cupped Elsie's face. You were so brave tonight. So strong. Don't ever forget that, okay? But they're going to hurt you. I'll be fine. The lie tasted bitter. Just take care of your mom. Stay close to her. Promise me. Elsie nodded, tears streaming. I promise. A Real guard touched Nia's shoulder, not rough, but firm. Let's go. Make this easy. Nia stood, squared her shoulders, looked Conrad dead in the eye. You might own this house. You might own half this city, but you don't own the truth. And it always comes out eventually. Conrad smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Truth is expensive, Nia. Most people can't afford it. They escorted her down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the service entrance. The night air hit her face like a slap. Her mind spun. What just happened? What do I do now? Behind her, through a second-floor window, Nia caught movement. Victoria standing there, hand pressed against the glass. Their eyes met for 3 seconds. Then Victoria turned away, disappeared into darkness. And Nia understood. Some people were prisoners in mansions. Some wore chains made of gold. But chains were still chains. The guard handed her a black trash bag. Your things. You're banned from the property. If you come back, we call the cops. Nia took the bag, walked toward the iron gates, felt them close behind her with a heavy clang. She didn't cry, couldn't afford to, because this wasn't over. Not even close. Nia made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. She collapsed onto a bus stop bench, bag clutched to her chest, hands trembling. The city stretched around her, silent, indifferent. 3 in the morning and not a soul in sight. What now? No job. No reference. Conrad Harrington would make sure no one in this city hired her again. 1 phone call and every door would slam shut. That's how power worked. Her phone buzzed in the bag. She dug it out. Unknown number. Hello. Is this Nia Clark? A woman's voice. Professional. Clipped. Who's asking? Officer Reyes, Precinct 14. We received a call about an incident at the Harrington estate tonight. We need you to come in for questioning. Nia's stomach dropped. Questioning? I'm the one who tried to stop. Ma'am, we have statements from multiple witnesses saying you attacked 2 medical professionals and caused significant property damage. Mr. Harrington has filed a formal complaint. Of course he had. That's not what happened, Nia said, voice shaking. Those men weren't medical staff. They were trying to kill his wife. His daughter saw everything. The daughter is 7 years old. Her testimony isn't reliable. And Mrs. Harrington confirmed her husband's version of events. The world tilted sideways. Victoria had lied, backed Conrad's story, thrown Nia under the bus to save herself. Can you come involuntarily? Officer Reyes continued. Or do we need to send a unit to pick you up? Nia closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed run. Disappear. Get on a bus and never look back. But running meant admitting defeat. Running meant Conrad won. I'll come in, she said quietly. But I'm telling the truth. All of it. We'll take your statement. Be here by 8 a.m. The line went dead. Nia sat there, staring at her phone. Behind her, sirens wailed in the distance, not coming for her, just the usual city chaos. Ambulances, fire trucks, life and death playing out on every street corner, while rich people slept in fortresses. Her phone buzzed again. Text message. Unknown number. You should have minded your business. Leave town or things get worse. Ice flooded her veins. Another text. A photo this time. Her apartment building. Her car parked outside. The message was clear. We know where you live. Nia's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone. This was real. This was happening. Conrad Harrington wasn't just powerful. He was dangerous. And she'd just made herself his enemy. But then she thought about Elsie. That little girl's face. The way she'd begged for help. The way she'd hugged Nia afterward, called her brave. If you'd never stand by while someone innocent suffers, subscribe now. Silence lets evil win. What kind of person would she be if she walked away? If she let fear win? Maybe the smart move was running. Maybe survival meant knowing when you were outmatched. But Nia had grown up poor. She'd watched her mother clean houses for people who treated her like furniture. She'd learned early that the world wasn't fair, wasn't kind, didn't care about people like her. But she also learned something else. You don't measure your life by how safe you played it. You measure it by the moments you chose to stand up, even when standing up meant getting knocked down. She stood, squared her shoulders, started walking, not toward the precinct, not toward her apartment, toward the 24-hour diner 3 blocks west where her cousin worked nights, toward someone who might listen, toward help. Because if Conrad thought one threatening text would make her disappear, he didn't know who he was dealing with. This fight was just beginning. By morning, the story hit the news. Disgruntled Maid attacks Billionaire's medical staff. Nia stared at the TV screen in the diner, coffee gone cold in her hand. Her cousin Tasha stood beside her, arms crossed, face tight with anger. That's not what happened, Tasha said. Tell me that's not what happened. It's not. Nia's voice felt distant, hollow. But no one's going to believe me. The news anchor's voice droned on. Conrad Harrington, philanthropist and CEO of Harrington Industries, released a statement expressing concern for the employees' mental health. Sources say Clark had been exhibiting erratic behavior for weeks prior to the incident. Lies. All lies. The screen cut to footage, grainy, security camera angle, showing Nia swinging the brass lamp, guards trying to restrain her. They'd edited out everything before, made it look like she'd attacked unprovoked. Harrington has chosen not to press charges, the anchor continued, citing compassion and hope that Clark receives the help she needs. Tasha snorted. Compassion. That's rich. But Nia understood the strategy. Conrad wasn't pressing charges because a trial meant evidence, witnesses, cross-examination. Better to paint her as unstable and let public opinion destroy her quietly. Smart. Cruel. Effective. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. Subject line. Employment verification request. She opened it. Her stomach sank. 3 job applications she'd submitted weeks ago, all suddenly withdrawn. Positions no longer available. Thank you for your interest. Another email. Her landlord. Rent increased notice. Effective immediately. Double the current amount. Another. Her bank. Suspicious activity flagged on her account. Funds temporarily frozen pending investigation. Tasha read over her shoulder. What the hell? He's destroying me. Nia set the phone down before she threw it. Systematically. Every angle. That's illegal. Prove it. Nia laughed bitterly. He's got lawyers, money, connections. I've got nothing. On the TV, a legal analyst appeared. While the incident is troubling, it's worth noting Clark has no prior criminal record. However, sources indicate financial troubles and recent eviction notices may have contributed to her mental state. Eviction notices? Tasha's voice rose. You've lived in that apartment for 4 years. You're never late on rent. I wasn't. Nia's jaw tightened. Until this morning, apparently. The analyst continued. The Harrington family has expressed gratitude to their security team and hopes this serves as a reminder to thoroughly vet household staff. Translation: she's dangerous. She's unstable. She's everything wrong with letting the wrong kind of people into your home. Nia watched her life get dismantled on live television while the man who tried to murder his wife walked free. And the worst part? Most people would believe it, because billionaires didn't lie. Maids did. The police station smelled like stale coffee and broken promises. Nia sat in the interrogation room, windowless, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, metal table cold under her palms. She'd been here for 2 hours. No charges filed yet. Just questions. Endless, circular questions designed to trap her. Detective Morris sat across from her, file folder open, expression neutral. Walk me through it one more time. I already told you. Tell me again. Nia swallowed her frustration. Repeated the story. Elsie bursting in. The locked door. Victoria's arm hanging limp. The pillow in gloved hands. Morris made notes. Didn't look convinced. And you're certain these were hired attackers? Not medical professionals. I know what I saw. Mrs. Harrington says otherwise. So does her husband. So do the 2 men you assaulted. They're lying. Or you misunderstood a medical emergency. Morris leaned back. Let's talk about your background, Nia. You grew up in South Memphis, correct? Her chest tightened. What does that have to do with anything? Just trying to get the full picture. Father, not in the home. Mother worked 3 jobs. You dropped out of college sophomore year due to, he checked the file, financial hardship. I had to help my mom. She got sick. Right. And you've worked 15 different jobs in the past 8 years. That's a lot of turnover. I worked whatever paid the bills, including a brief stint at a psychiatric care facility where you were let go after an incident with a patient. Care to explain that? Nia's hands curled into fists. A patient attacked a nurse. I intervened. The facility blamed me instead of fixing their security problem. So you have a history of inserting yourself into volatile situations. I have a history of helping people when no one else will. Morris, close the file. Here's my problem, Nia. You're asking me to believe that one of the most respected men in this city tried to murder his wife. A man who donates millions to charity. A man with 0 history of violence. And the only witness is you, someone with financial troubles, job instability, and a documented pattern of aggressive behavior. Documented by who? Him. By multiple employers. The walls closed in. Nia realized what was happening. Conrad hadn't just framed her for tonight. He'd been building a case against her credibility for hours, calling former employers, manufacturing complaints, planting seeds of doubt. You're letting him get away with attempted murder, she said quietly. Morris stood. I'm following the evidence, which right now suggests you experienced a mental health crisis and need intervention, not incarceration. Mr. Harrington is being generous by not pressing charges. I suggest you accept that gift and move on with your life. And if I don't, he paused at the door. Then things get complicated. For you. The door closed. The lock clicked. And Nia sat alone in that cold room, realizing she'd underestimated just how deep Conrad's power ran. Nia walked out of the precinct at noon, blinking against harsh sunlight. No charges filed. But no apology either. Just a warning to stay away from the Harrington family or face arrest for harassment. She stood on the steps, exhausted, defeated, wondering where she'd even sleep tonight. Her phone buzzed. News alert. Breaking. Victoria Harrington releases statement contradicting husband's account of assault incident. Nia's heart stopped. She clicked the link. A video played. Victoria sitting in what looked like a hotel room. Hair brushed, makeup covering bruises, but eyes still haunted. She spoke directly to the camera. My name is Victoria Harrington, and I need to tell the truth about what happened 3 nights ago. Her voice shook, but held steady. My husband hired 2 men to kill me. They held a pillow over my face until I couldn't breathe. If Nia Clark hadn't intervened, I would be dead right now. She saved my life, and my husband has spent the last 72 hours destroying hers to cover up what he did. Nia's vision blurred. She grabbed the railing to stay upright. The video continued. I have hospital records showing injuries consistent with assault. I have recordings from my personal phone documenting threats my husband made. I have bank statements showing payments to unlicensed individuals with criminal backgrounds, the same men who attacked me. Victoria's jaw tightened. Conrad Harrington tried to murder me so he could marry his mistress and gain full control of my family's fortune. He thought money and power would let him get away with it. But I'm not staying silent anymore. And neither should anyone else who's watched someone innocent get destroyed by lies. The video ended. Comments exploded underneath, thousands within seconds. Most supportive, some vicious, all debating, arguing, sharing. It was going viral. Tasha called immediately. Are you seeing this? Yeah. Nia could barely speak. She actually did it. She spoke up. Girl, this is blowing up everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Everyone's talking about it. People are calling Conrad a monster. His company's stock is dropping. This is huge. Nia watched the view count climb. 200,000. 500,000. 1 million. Victoria had just blown up her entire life to tell the truth. Risked everything. For Nia. For justice. For her daughter. Comment, I stand for justice, if you'd never side with men like Conrad. Another alert. Conrad's lawyer released a statement calling Victoria's claims the tragic result of mental illness and substance abuse. Trying to discredit her, paint her as unstable. But it was too late. The internet had already chosen sides. And for once, the maid wasn't the villain. What do you do now? Tasha asked. Nia straightened her spine. I fight back. 24 hours later, the counterattack began. Nia woke to find her bank account completely drained. Not frozen, emptied. Every dollar gone. The message was clear. Victoria had declared war, and Conrad was making sure everyone who stood with her paid the price. She called the bank. Got transferred 4 times. Finally reached someone who explained in a bored tone that a creditor had filed a judgment against her for unpaid debt. What debt? I don't owe anyone. According to our records, you defaulted on a personal loan taken out 6 months ago. $17,000. I never took out a loan. The paperwork says otherwise. If you believe this is fraudulent, you'll need to file a dispute. Processing time is 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks without money. Without a way to buy food, pay rent, survive. Conrad wasn't just punishing her. He was erasing her. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Nia Clark. A man's voice. Unfamiliar. Cautious. Who's asking? My name is Terrence. I worked for Conrad. Maintenance staff. He fired me this morning. Nia's pulse quickened. Why? Because I told the other employees what really happened that night. That you were telling the truth. He paused. He's getting rid of anyone who might contradict his story. 6 people fired in the last 2 days. All of us who were on property that night. All of us who saw things. Her stomach dropped. He's silencing witnesses. Worse. He's making sure we can't afford lawyers. Can't fight back. Some of us have families, kids. We can't risk going public, like Mrs. Harrington did. We need our jobs. So why are you calling me? Terrence went quiet for a moment. Because I found something. In his office. Documents he told me to shred, but I kept copies. Financial records. Offshore accounts. Payments to people with, let's just say, bad reputations. Nia's breath caught. Evidence. Enough to put him away for a long time. If we can get it to the right people without him finding out. Where are you now? Safe house. A friend's place across town. But I need to move the documents somewhere he can't reach. And I need someone who's already on his radar, someone he's focused on, so I can stay invisible long enough to. The line went dead. Nia pulled the phone away, stared at the blank screen. Tried calling back. Number disconnected. Her hands shook. Terrence had evidence. Real evidence. But Conrad had just cut off their only connection. Unless this was a trap. Unless Conrad had sent Terrence to lure her into something worse. She couldn't trust anyone anymore. Couldn't tell friend from enemy. Couldn't see the next move coming. And that's exactly what Conrad wanted. The knock came at 2 in the morning. Nia had been crashing on Tasha's couch for 3 days, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. When Knuckles rapped against the apartment door, soft, hesitant, her body went rigid. Tasha appeared from her bedroom, baseball bat in hand. Who the hell? Police, a small voice called through the door. I need help. Nia's blood froze. She knew that voice. She crossed the room in 3 strides, unlocked the deadbolt, yanked the door open. Elsie stood in the hallway, barefoot, wearing pajamas and a thin jacket, blonde hair tangled, face streaked with tears. Oh my God! Nia dropped to her knees, hands on the girl's shoulders. Elsie, what are you doing here? How did you? I took a taxi. Elsie's voice cracked. I gave them the address you put in my backpack. Remember? In case of emergencies. Last year, Nia had tucked a card with her contact info into Elsie's school bag. Just in case. Never thinking the girl would actually need it. Does your dad know you're here? Elsie shook her head. He thinks I'm asleep. But I heard him. On the phone. He said. Her lip trembled. He said if Mummy keeps talking to reporters, she'll have an accident. A real one this time. Nia's stomach turned to ice. He's going to hurt her again, Elsie whispered. And Mummy won't fight back because she's scared. She keeps crying and saying she made a mistake going public. That she put me in danger. Tasha stepped closer. Sweetie, we need to call someone. No. Elsie grabbed Nia's arms. You can't call anyone. Daddy has people everywhere. Police, lawyers, everyone. That's what Mummy said. That's why she left the house. She's hiding somewhere safe, but she couldn't take me because Daddy has custody, and it would be kidnapping. Where's your mother now? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me. Said it's safer if I don't know. Fresh tears spilled down Elsie's cheeks. But I can't stay with Daddy anymore. He's scary now. He threw a glass at the wall yesterday and told me if I talked to any reporters or police, bad things would happen to Mummy. Nia pulled the girl into a hug, felt her small body shake with sobs. You have to help her, Elsie said into Nia's shoulder. Please. You're the only one brave enough. You didn't run away when everyone else did. You stayed and fought. Baby, I don't know if I can. Elsie pulled back, looked her dead in the eye. Yes, you can. Because you're not like other grown-ups. You don't let bad people win. Nia's throat tightened. This 7-year-old girl had snuck out of her father's mansion in the middle of the night, taken a taxi across the city, and tracked down a maid with no money, no job, no power. Because she believed Nia could save her mother. How could she say no to that? Okay, Nia said quietly. I'll help. But we do this smart. No more rushing in blind. Elsie nodded, wiped her eyes. What do we do first? Nia looked at Tasha. Then back at Elsie. First, we find your mother. Then we find the evidence. Then we end this. Getting Elsie safely back to the mansion without alerting Conrad took all night. Nia called in a favor from Tasha's boyfriend, A guy who drove for a private car service and owed them both. He dropped Elsie off 3 blocks from the estate at 5 a.m., right before the neighborhood security patrols changed shifts. The girl slipped through a gap in the hedge fence she'd used before when sneaking out to explore. By the time Conrad woke up, Elsie was back in bed, supposedly asleep the entire night. But she'd left Nia something before she went. A USB drive, hidden in her jacket pocket. "Mummy gave it to me before she left," Elsie had whispered. Said if something happened to her, give it to someone who'd know what to do with it. Now Nia sat at Tasha's kitchen table, laptop open, hands hovering over the keyboard. "You sure you want to look?" Tasha leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Could be bait. Conrad could have planted that drive knowing Elsie would bring it to you. Only one way to find out. Nia plugged it in, held her breath. Files loaded. Dozens of them. Documents, photos, audio recordings. She clicked the first folder. Bank statements appeared. Conrad's offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Transactions highlighted. Payments labeled consulting fees, going to individuals with criminal records. 3 of them matched the descriptions of the men who'd attacked Victoria. Next folder. Emails between Conrad and someone named Julian Cross. Subject lines like timeline for transfer and ensuring no complications. Nia opened one. Her pulse spiked. Julian, Victoria's becoming a problem. The prenup expires next month, and she'll be entitled to half of everything, including the trust funds from her father's estate. We discussed alternative solutions. Implement Phase 1 this week. Make it look natural. Payment on completion. Phase 1. The murder attempt. Holy hell, Tasha breathed, reading over her shoulder. That's a confession. Not quite. He's careful. Doesn't use explicit language. But combined with the bank statements and Victoria's testimony, Nia scrolled further. This could actually work. Another folder caught her eye. Medical records, VH. She opened it. Found something that made her stomach drop. Psychiatric evaluations. Signed by Dr. Raymond Shun. All dated within the last 6 months. All declaring Victoria Harrington mentally unstable, prone to delusions, a danger to herself and others. He was building a case, Nia said slowly. If the murder didn't work, he'd have her committed. Either way, he wins custody of Elsie and control of Victoria's money. That's sick. That's calculated. Nia ejected the drive, closed the laptop. And now we've got proof. So what's the play? Nia thought about Terrence's disconnected phone. Victoria in hiding. Elsie terrified in her own home. All the people Conrad had silenced, discredited, destroyed. We go public. All of it. Everywhere. Before he can stop us. The brief moment of euphoria from finding the USB drive died quickly. It was drowned out by the roar of Conrad's counteroffensive, a wave of noise that swallowed the truth whole. The very next day, the internet wasn't talking about Conrad's offshore accounts or his chilling conspiracy emails. They were only talking about Nia. The headlines were vicious. Harrington Maid's violent past and mental health crisis led to assault. Conrad hadn't tried to silence the truth. He drowned it in a manufactured flood of doubt. He hadn't just predicted Nia would fight back. He'd prepared a meticulous defense, turning her real-life struggles into weapons. The most damaging leak came not from the police, but from a concerned source close to the Harrington family. The leak contained excerpts from Dr. Chen's psychiatric evaluation, the very documents Nia had found on Victoria's own USB drive. But the version that hit the media had been skillfully warped. Conrad took their own secret, Victoria's manufactured instability, and used it like a precision weapon. The script was simple. Nia Clark was a mentally unstable, vengeful former employee, acting only on the hysterical delusions of her employer, Victoria, who had a documented history of aggressive paranoia. Nia sat at Tasha's table, watching her own face on a talk show panel. The lawyer, slick and smug, didn't even mention the murder attempt. He just hammered Nia's past, The college dropout, the multiple low-paying jobs, the fabricated debt, and the volatile incident at the psychiatric facility years ago. We have overwhelming evidence that Ms. Clark has a documented history of delusions of grandeur and unwarranted intervention. The lawyer's voice oozed confidence. This woman isn't a hero. She's a clear danger. And the fact that Victoria Harrington, whom we now know has severe mental health issues, is supporting her only confirms Ms. Clark's manipulative influence. Nia felt the floor shifting again. It wasn't just the lies. It was the truth wrapped around the lies. Conrad had taken Nia's real-life struggles, her poverty, her instability, and weaponized them, retroactively discrediting her very existence. The public doubt hit her like a physical blow. The supportive comments on Victoria's video started changing. People hesitated, backing away. Because deep down, many people subconsciously trusted the billionaire over the maid, especially when the maid had documented instability. Tasha, pacing the small living room, relayed the final, crippling blow. "Nia, my landlord just called. He got an anonymous offer, double the market rate, to buy this building cash. Conrad is trying to make me homeless just for letting you sleep on my couch. He's closing in, girl. We have the truth, but it's not working fast enough." Nia stared at the USB drive, a tiny piece of plastic that held the key to justice, yet felt like a worthless stone against the weight of Conrad's lies. She had the facts, but he controlled the narrative. And a 7-year-old girl was still trapped in his gilded cage. The cold reality of Conrad's relentless power settled around Nia like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She held undeniable evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and attempted murder. But she couldn't use it. Nia knew releasing the USB drive's contents now, the raw, undoctored files, would certainly expose Conrad. But it would also expose Victoria's location if his lawyers tracked the upload, and it would put Elsie in immediate, undeniable danger. Justice, she realized, wasn't a flip of a coin. It was a terrifying calculation. She had to choose. Save her own name and reputation right now, or hold the line to protect the only 2 innocent people left in this fight. She spent hours going over the files with Tasha, looking for an escape route. Tasha begged her to upload the files. "We have to do it, Nia. This proves he was planning to kill her and get her committed. It proves his lies about you." But Nia was unyielding. And if he realizes where Victoria is hiding, if he realizes Elsie gave us this, he will hit them first. He already tried to make you homeless, Tasha. He's not playing games. She had to think like the enemy. Conrad wasn't worried about the truth. He was worried about the timing. He needed to discredit Victoria before the custody judge saw the raw evidence. Nia realized she had to wait for the exact moment when the evidence would do the most damage. She made a difficult call to Serafina Kage's legal team, explaining the risk. The lawyer was crisp and professional. "You are making a sound strategic move, Miss Clark. We have a judge for the emergency motion tomorrow. If we drop this bombshell evidence at the custody hearing, he can't spin the narrative fast enough." The stakes were impossibly high. Nia was preparing to walk into the lion's den, the courtroom, with a USB drive that could save 3 lives or end all of their chances. It was a terrifying act of faith. She was betting everything on the loyalty of a desperate mother and the courage of a maid. She looked at Tasha, who had sacrificed her peace for this fight. She thought of Victoria, hiding and fighting. She thought of Terrence, the fired staff member, who still held the final financial documents. Some people are quick to forget the struggle of others. They scroll past the stories of sacrifice. But if you're not one of them, share if you believe loyalty still exists. Only the cold-hearted scroll past stories like this. Nia Clark, the maid they called unstable, was walking into the courthouse tomorrow. The final chapter begins now. The courtroom was a circus, precisely as Conrad had planned. He strode in, flanked by a phalanx of expensive lawyers, confidently presenting the warped psychiatric evaluations that painted Victoria as unfit and Nia as delusional. The custody judge, looking tired and prepared to side with wealth, listened to the case. Nia sat alone in the gallery, the USB drive warm and heavy in her pocket. The moment of truth arrived when Conrad's lead counsel presented the final, fabricated document. A fake receipt proving Nia had supposedly paid the men she claimed were assassins, suggesting she hired them to stage the entire attack. Just as the judge was about to rule on temporary full custody for Conrad, Serafina Kage's lead counsel, whom Nia had quietly met outside, stood up. He was not there to represent Nia, but to present evidence on behalf of his client's concern for corporate ethics. He submitted the unedited contents of the USB drive. The courtroom plunged into a profound silence. The judge took the documents, his expression shifting from bored skepticism to utter disbelief. Victoria's genuine medical records, Conrad's emails detailing Phase 1, the confirmed bank transfers to the hitmen, and the official paperwork he manufactured to have Victoria committed. It was all there, undeniable and terrifying. Conrad exploded, his composure shattering as he accused Serafina of corporate espionage and hacking. His desperate outburst, witnessed by everyone present, only reinforced the true image of a violent, cornered man. That same evening, the damning emails and financial records were leaked to every major news outlet. This time, they were the raw, verified documents. The narrative flipped instantly. The Maid was no longer a disgruntled attacker. She was a crucial witness and a hero. The headline screamed, "Billionaire CEO tried to murder wife, frame Maid." Nia's face, which had been the target of hate and doubt just days earlier, was suddenly the face of resistance. Her initial, shaky interview re-aired alongside the new proof, solidifying her credibility. Elsie was immediately placed in protective custody with Victoria, who emerged from hiding, validated and strong. Nia had risked everything: her freedom, Tasha's home, her reputation, and she had won the initial, difficult battle. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People who had called her a liar were now demanding interviews and offering congratulations. Offers for book deals, security, and speaking tours flooded her inbox. It was a dizzying, total victory. But as she watched the wave of public validation pour in, Nia felt a strange hollowness. The truth was out, but the fight had cost her every simple comfort she used to know. If you believe that courage always finds its reward, no matter the cost, like this video. The courtroom victory was loud, but it did not bring peace. Public vindication didn't bring quiet. It brought a new kind of terror. Nia went from being completely invisible to being relentlessly visible. Reporters and cameramen camped outside Tasha's apartment, their flashes popping like gunfire, all hoping for a quick quote. Her life, once hidden in the shadows of the wealthy, was now a public spectacle, picked apart and analyzed by millions. Every former employer was contacted again, this time to confirm her heroism. Every single story was sensationalized and sold for profit. Worse than the simple attention was the fresh wave of doubt. Even with Conrad under a criminal investigation for financial crimes and attempted murder, the whispers continued. Anonymous social media accounts, almost certainly funded by Conrad's dwindling loyalists, started planting insidious new questions. Did Nia Clark simply profit off Victoria's tragedy? Why was she so quick to partner with Serafina Kage? Was this just an orchestrated play for fame and fortune? The narrative shifted dramatically. Nia was no longer crazy, but rather a cunning master manipulator who used Victoria's vulnerability to climb the social ladder. She couldn't walk down the street without someone recognizing her, either whispering effusive praise or snapping a photo. She felt perpetually exposed, constantly hunted. The same people who had championed her courage now loudly debated her inner motives. Her exhaustion was profound, a deep weariness that settled into her bones. She couldn't shake the chilling feeling that Conrad, even operating from a holding cell, was still reaching out, poisoning the well of public trust. Tasha tried her best to shield her, but there was no escaping the vast digital echo chamber. Nia realized that the narrative she had fought so hard to correct was now completely out of her own control, a new, unbearable burden. One evening, walking down a darkened hallway in Tasha's building, she swore she saw a shadow, not a photographer, but someone watching and waiting. Her old fear, the primal feeling of being hunted by Conrad's dark network, returned with sickening force. She was publicly hailed as a hero, but her privacy, her safety, and her quiet, simple life were gone forever. She had won the fight for the truth, but she had lost the battle for her own peace. If you think fame is a trap and not a reward, tell us in the comments what you'd do to disappear. The dizzying altitude of public fame made Nia miss the quiet ground of real life. To find it, she retreated to the one thing Conrad couldn't touch: loyalty. She started meeting with the other staff Conrad had fired and ruined: the cooks, the drivers, the maintenance workers like Terrence. They met in a small community center Tasha managed to secure. They were bruised and financially broken, but they were no longer isolated. They shared stories, confirming every suspicion Nia had about Conrad's calculated cruelty. They were an army of witnesses, silently rebuilding their lives together. Nia realized that her victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to this small, courageous community of people who were never meant to matter. Tasha, always the rock, helped Nia look forward. She set up a small fund to help the staff get back on their feet. Nia used her own sudden, modest income from early media appearances, money she hadn't expected to earn, to quietly contribute to the fund. It wasn't about power or revenge. It was about ensuring the wrong kind of people didn't win in the end. Her most important bond, though, was with Elsie. Victoria was working with Serafina's lawyers to finalize the divorce and protective orders. But Elsie still carried the deep fear of the mansion. Nia spent afternoons with the girl, not talking about the trial, but teaching her how to be brave in small, practical ways. They would walk into a crowded store, and Nia would encourage Elsie to ask the clerk a question, or deliberately drop her wallet and ask a stranger for help picking it up. These weren't lessons in self-defense. They were lessons in trusting the right people and finding strength in small acts of courage. One day, Elsie looked up at Nia and said, "You weren't scared of my dad, were you?" "I was terrified," Nia admitted. "But I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't try." That was the lesson. Courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward anyway. Nia had been hated for telling the truth, and she knew she would continue to be attacked. But looking at the small, growing community she helped save, she wouldn't trade their honesty for the world's false approval. If you'd rather be hated for honesty than loved for lies, subscribe now. Cowards side with corruption. Nia knew the next attack was coming, but she had a whole team waiting with her this time. The calm of community building was abruptly shattered. Conrad might have been confined, but his reach was not. The second, more precise attack didn't come from a major news corporation. It came from the digital underground, cold and calculated. A mysterious file suddenly appeared on a dark corner of the internet, then swiftly amplified by social media bots. It wasn't the manufactured bank fraud or the fake police reports. It was something far more specific, far more personal, and far more damaging to her core credibility. The file contained the actual unedited HR records from the psychiatric facility where Nia had worked years ago, the place where she was fired after intervening in a patient attack. The file didn't lie about the event. It confirmed that Nia did intervene when a patient attacked a nurse. But the narrative in the report was carefully damning. It claimed Nia acted with unnecessary force, showing a pattern of escalating physical confrontation rather than de-escalation. It even included a detailed clinical note written by the facility director at the time, stating Nia showed impulsive violence under pressure. The narrative changed instantly again. The whispers weren't about greed now. They were about pathology. Nia wasn't a hero who saved a life. She was a dangerous vigilante with an uncontrollable temper who finally found an excuse for violence in the Harrington mansion. The social media attacks were brutal. Commenters now cited the proof that Nia had an underlying issue, suggesting the brass lamp swing wasn't courage, but a psychotic break. The digital fire was overwhelming. She saw her face edited onto images of movie villains, her name trending not for bravery, but for being a textbook sociopath. The fear was different this time. Before, she was afraid of losing her job and home. Now, she was afraid of losing her mind, because the documents felt like they were written specifically to gaslight her into questioning her own memories. She showed the file to Tasha, her hands shaking. "This is impossible," Nia whispered. That file was sealed. Only the facility and the state licensing board had access. How did he get this? Tasha looked at the screen, her face pale. Conrad didn't get this, Nia. Someone who hates you more than money did this. Someone who knew exactly where to look for the one thing that truly scares you. The anonymous source that released the file was gone before the lawyers could track it. But the damage was done. Nia realized that Conrad was just the head of the monster. Its tentacles stretched into every dark corner of the world she knew. Her past, her real, complex, difficult past, was now weaponized against her, ready to destroy the future she had risked everything to build. The quiet strength she had found in community felt thin and fragile against this invisible, pervasive threat. She could fight a man in a courtroom, but how could she fight a ghost that knew her deepest secrets? The attacks on Nia's character, the weaponizing of her past facility records, were intended to paralyze her. But instead, the rage, the cold, righteous rage of having her truth dismantled one last time, focused her. She was preparing for the long, slow legal war against Conrad, the man who was still pulling strings, even from custody. Then, the unimaginable happened. The news broke late one afternoon. Conrad, leveraging every legal loophole and every favor owed, had been granted temporary release, pending his arraignment on the attempted murder charge. He was out on a staggering bail, a final, desperate move that shocked everyone. Hours later, Tasha grabbed Nia's arm, pointing at the breaking news report flashing across the diner's old television screen. Flames. Massive, churning flames were consuming the Harrington estate. The anchor's voice was frantic. The former residence of Conrad Harrington is engulfed in a 4-alarm blaze. Sources confirmed that Victoria Harrington and her daughter, Elsie, were recently moved back to a secure section of the property under a joint protection order. A new, ice-cold dread hit Nia. They were there. The fire wasn't an accident. It was Conrad's final, catastrophic act of destruction. He wasn't just destroying his past life. He was attempting to erase the only remaining evidence of his vulnerability, his wife and his child. Nia didn't wait for the lawyers or the police. She grabbed her jacket and ran. Tasha screamed after her, but Nia was deaf to everything but the image of those flames. When she arrived, the mansion was a towering inferno, thick smoke choking the expensive, manicured neighborhood. Fire trucks were everywhere, their sirens useless against the sheer, overwhelming power of the blaze. The security teams, Conrad's old staff, were nowhere to be seen, having melted away when the criminal investigation began. Nia knew the layout of the old wing. She knew the secret entrance to the small, fortified panic room that Victoria, whom the lawyers referred to as Grace, had insisted on using for their temporary security. She slipped past a panicked police barricade and vaulted the low stone wall. The heat was immediate, oppressive. She used the back entrance, moving through a service hall where the brass lamp had been kept. The walls were already blistered, paint peeling in black strips. She found Victoria near the access door to the panic room. Victoria wasn't injured. She was hysterical, beating uselessly on the heavy, locked door, coughing violently. Elsie's inside. The smoke alarm must have triggered the automated lock, and the mechanism jammed. I can't get the manual override. Victoria was completely overcome with smoke inhalation and terror. Nia had to slap her hard to bring her back to reality. Give me the code. Nia yelled, grabbing the manual keypad. Victoria choked out the sequence. The lock light flashed red. It wasn't jammed, it was dead. The fire had taken out the power line. Nia looked up. The mahogany ceiling above them was cracking and spitting embers. She remembered something Terrence, the maintenance man, had told her. There was an old air duct leading from the panic room up to the attic. It was cramped, but a small person could fit. "Where's the vent?" Nia demanded. Victoria pointed weakly to a high corner, before collapsing onto the floor. Nia dragged Victoria into a relatively clear stairwell, covering her with a damp coat. Then she found the vent, kicking off the cover. Smoke poured out like an open wound. She shouted Elsie's name, her voice raw. "Nia." Elsie's voice was faint, terrified. "I'm coming, sweetie. You have to crawl." Nia began to climb, pulling herself into the tight, burning duct. She moved on pure adrenaline, ignoring the searing pain against her skin. The wood beams groaned under the intense heat. She reached the panic room ceiling, kicking the grate open. Elsie, tiny and covered in soot, was huddled below. "Take my hand, baby, now." Nia pulled the child up into the vent and began to backtrack, talking constantly, coaching Elsie through the burning darkness. They emerged into the stairwell, just as the main roof above the panic room corridor buckled and fell with a deafening crash, showering the air with burning debris. Nia snatched Elsie up, tucked her tight against her chest, and ran. She got them both out, coughing and scorched, collapsing onto the dew-soaked lawn just as the first part of the mansion's south wing was reduced to a roaring shell. The smoke-choked faces of Victoria and Elsie, alive and safe, were the only things that mattered. Nia had won the final, physical fight. If you'd risk everything to save a life, drop a fire in comments and subscribe. Cowards turn away. We stand for courage. The mansion was gone, but the innocent were free. Nia finally saw the ambulance lights coming for Victoria and Elsie. Realizing she hadn't just saved a life, she had salvaged her own broken honor. The morning after the fire was a quiet, cold, and utterly devastating sight. The Harrington estate, once a symbol of impenetrable wealth and quiet cruelty, was now a steaming, charred skeleton. The marble columns were blackened, and the famous roof was a jagged ruin open to the pale sky. The physical structure of Conrad's power was gone. Nia stood across the street with Tasha, watching the investigators pick through the rubble. Conrad had been apprehended hours after the fire, found miles away, attempting to flee the city. The attempted murder charge was now compounded by arson and kidnapping allegations. This time, there would be no bail. He was finished. Victoria, released from the hospital with Elsie at her side, joined Nia. Victoria was pale, but her eyes held a clarity Nia had never seen before. "It's all gone," Victoria whispered, looking at the smoke-stained ruins of her life. "The furniture, the art, the library, it's just ash." "No," Nia said quietly, looking at Elsie, who was holding her mother's hand tightly. "That house wasn't your life, Victoria. That house was just a beautiful cage." Victoria smiled, a real, genuine, unburdened smile. "You saved me from the fire, Nia. But you saved me from him long before that. You saved me when you stood up in the dark, armed with a brass lamp." They looked down at their hands. Victoria's were smooth, aristocratic, but bandaged from minor burns. Nia's were rough, scarred, and covered in soot from hauling a child through a burning duct. They were hands from different worlds, united by the same desperate fight. The loss was immense. Victoria had lost her home and most of her immediate assets, now frozen in legal proceedings. Nia had lost her already fragile peace and gained a lifetime of public scrutiny. But standing there, watching the smoke drift up toward the clear sky, Nia felt an unexpected lightness. She had faced the monster at its worst, and she had won. Her reward wasn't money or fame. It was the quiet knowledge that the innocent were safe because of her choice to intervene. The media storm still swirled, but it felt distant now. Nia finally saw her future not as a maid working to survive, but as someone who had earned the right to choose her own path. She had the community of fired staff, Victoria's unwavering support, and Tasha's fierce loyalty. They had traded a gilded life for freedom, a grand mansion for a fresh start, and a relentless pursuit of wealth for the simple, precious burden of hope. It was a costly fight, paid for in loss, but the future felt bright and entirely, wonderfully their own. The air smelled clean for the first time in months. The smoke from the Harrington estate had cleared, and with Conrad safely locked away, no bail this time, no favors left to call, the toxic atmosphere that had poisoned Nia's life finally lifted. The legal battles were far from over, but the war was decisively won. Victoria and Elsie were safe, living quietly in a modest, undisclosed location with protection provided by Serafina Kage's firm. Nia finally had a moment to breathe, though the peace felt fragile, temporary, like standing on glass. Her reputation, though fiercely defended by the new evidence, was still a complicated mess. Half the world called her a hero. The other half, spurred by Conrad's anonymous attacks, still whispered she was a volatile schemer. She had money now, not millions, but enough of the legal fees she was owed, along with the reward Victoria had promised her, to buy a small house and truly start over. But Nia didn't want a house. She didn't want quiet comfort if the people who had stood by her were still suffering. She looked at Tasha, who had nearly lost her apartment, and Terrence, who was still driving Uber to make ends meet, and knew that true peace wasn't solitary. Victoria, who the lawyers now exclusively called Grace in official documents, signaling her new identity, visited Nia one evening. She came alone, driving a simple car, wearing clothes that weren't designer. The change in her was profound. The tension was gone, replaced by a deep-seated resolve. She didn't look like a trophy wife anymore. She looked like a survivor. "The insurance money is held up, of course," Victoria said, stirring a cup of coffee in Tasha's kitchen. "But there is one thing Conrad couldn't touch. My father's trust. It was specifically earmarked for public welfare if I ever left the marriage under duress. Now that the judge has seen the evidence, the release is imminent." Nia waited. She knew Victoria was capable of donating millions to some distant, clean-cut charity. That was the old way, throwing money at a problem to feel better. "I'm not giving it to a foundation run by strangers," Victoria continued, her voice firm. "I'm giving it to us. All of us. You, me, Terrence, the cleaning staff, the drivers, the cooks. The people who saw the truth and were destroyed for it." Her vision was simple but radical. A community bond center. It would be a safe space offering counseling, job training, and legal advice for people in service industries who faced exploitation. It would be a place where the powerful couldn't reach, a sanctuary built by those who understood what it was like to be invisible. "I need you to run it, Nia," Victoria said. "I can supply the money, but you supply the purpose. You know what it feels like to be trapped and judged. You know how to fight back without money. I need you to build a fortress of honesty." Nia hesitated, not because of the responsibility, but because of the title. Director. It sounded so grand, so corporate, everything she had learned to distrust. "Don't worry about the title," Victoria said, reading her expression. "Worry about the work. We're building a shelter from the storm that almost swallowed us all." The search began, led by Nia and Tasha. They looked far away from the polished glass towers and sprawling estates. They searched in Nia's own neighborhood, the area she knew, where the struggle was real and the people were genuine. They finally found a building on a quiet, tree-lined street that was perfect. It was a large, two-story house, worn by time, neglected by landlords, but structurally solid. It had huge windows and a deep porch, a welcoming embrace, rather than an intimidating gate. It took weeks of negotiation and purchasing, but when the keys were finally in Nia's hand, she felt a surge of energy stronger than any adrenaline she'd felt running from fire. This was hers. This was theirs. The first official act wasn't hiring a construction crew. It was hiring the fired staff. Terrence, the maintenance worker who had provided the final evidence, was the first hire, appointed head of renovations. He brought in 2 other men who had lost their jobs, a skilled carpenter and a plumber. They worked together not as employees of a wealthy woman, but as partners in a mission. They tore down walls, replaced dry-rotted wood, and brought the old structure back to life. The centerpiece of the renovation became the color. Nia and Victoria decided on a complete contrast to the dark, intimidating stone of the mansion. They chose the brightest, most vibrant, and most hopeful color they could find. A brilliant, dazzling, almost impossibly bright blue. It wasn't the blue of cold steel. It was the blue of the clear sky on a perfect day, a beacon visible from blocks away. It was a visual declaration that the dark days were over. The locals started calling it the Blue House almost immediately. As the physical structure took shape, so did the community. The Blue House wasn't a bank or a courtroom. It was a workshop for self-respect. Nia established training programs, focusing on transferable skills, digital literacy, small business accounting, and most importantly, self-advocacy. The goal wasn't just to teach people how to get a job. It was to teach them how to demand respect and protect themselves from exploitation. Victoria formalized Nia's role, Director of Operations. Nia's first decision was to make Tasha the program coordinator, the person who knew the community's needs best. It was an organization run entirely by people who had been betrayed by the system it sought to fix. The grand opening was not a fancy gala. It was a Saturday afternoon barbecue. The lawn, freshly sodded by Terrence's team, was filled with people laughing, eating, and talking without looking over their shoulders. Fired chefs handled the grilling. Fired drivers handled transportation for seniors. It was a family reunion of the resilient. Elsie, now 8, was the center of the joy. She wasn't fearful anymore. She ran across the lawn with a group of other neighborhood children, her laughter bright and unfettered. Victoria watched her daughter, a tear tracing a clean path through the dust on her cheek. Nia stood on the front porch, the bright blue wall soaring behind her. She watched the organized chaos, the proof that loyalty, hard work, and honesty could build something real and lasting, something the old money and the old corruption could never destroy. She thought about the past, the dust in the mansion, the sharp click of the panic room lock, the fear, the isolation, the relentless public judgment. All of it had been worth it. She was still Nia Clark, the maid who stood up. But now she was also the director, the builder, the protector. She realized that the true power wasn't in owning the mansion. It was in owning the moral choice. And the most controversial truth of all? She had never been happier than she was right here, in the bright, messy, beautiful reality of the Blue House. If you believe that the greatest wealth is a clear conscience, tell us your thoughts on Nia's new life in the comments. The legal system moves slowly, often agonizingly, so especially when money is involved. But even the thickest walls of wealth cannot survive a coordinated attack by truth, courage, and a very good lawyer. Or, in this case, Serafina Kage's entire firm. For 6 long months after the fire, Nia lived under the constant pressure of depositions, cross-examinations, and the lingering, awful knowledge that Conrad Harrington still breathed air. He sat in his cell, not in a gilded cage, but in a real one, yet his legal team kept fighting, hoping to twist the narrative one last time. The final day arrived not in a grand, public spectacle, but in a small, packed courtroom. It was a hearing where the judge would finalize the charges, award permanent custody to Victoria Grace, and rule on the release of the final, crucial trust funds. Nia sat at the back of the room, not as a witness, but as a silent assurance for Grace. Terrence, Tasha, and several of the other fired staff sat with her, a quiet wall of working-class honesty against the arrogance of Conrad's defense. When Conrad was brought in, he looked older, smaller, his expensive suit replaced by prison blues. His eyes, however, still held that cold, predatory calculation. He looked straight at Nia, And in that long, silent stare, she saw not regret, but only pure, burning hatred. It was the look of a powerful man who had lost control, and it was the last time he would ever be able to intimidate her. Conrad's defense tried every angle. They pointed to the anonymous files about Nia's past volatility. They argued Grace was too unstable, still recovering from trauma, to be a fit mother. They claimed the fire was an insurance scam by Grace herself. But none of it mattered anymore. The mountain of evidence, the financial ledgers Terrence had saved, the emails detailing Phase 1, the psychiatric records Conrad had manufactured, and the testimony from the fire investigators proving arson, was insurmountable. The final silent nail in Conrad's coffin was the Falcon cufflink, presented not as physical evidence of the attack, but as proof of his direct, traceable link to the hired assassins. The judge, a formidable woman with a stern face, barely glanced at Conrad's trembling lawyer. The ruling was swift and decisive. Conrad Harrington was remanded without bail, facing a multitude of charges that would likely keep him incarcerated for the rest of his natural life. More importantly, Victoria, now legally recognized as Grace Harrington, was granted full, permanent, and sole custody of Elsie. The trust funds intended for public welfare were released to Grace immediately, designated to charitable works, as per her father's will. A quiet, collective breath filled the back of the courtroom. The war was over. The emotional arc that began with Nia's solitary defiance finally found its resting point in the shared silence of victory. Nia didn't feel the frantic rush of adrenaline, only a deep, bone-weary sense of closure. She stood up not to gloat or celebrate, but simply to walk out into the sunlight. The weeks that followed were filled with the bright, vibrant noise of the Blue House. With the trust funds released, Grace had secured the center's funding for decades to come, ensuring the work wouldn't be subject to political whims or budget cuts. Nia, as director of operations, had settled into her role perfectly. She was fair, firm, and understood exactly what was at stake for every person who walked through those bright blue doors. Terrence, now head of facilities and maintenance, joked that he finally had the budget to fix things the right way, not the cheap way Conrad demanded. Tasha ran the training programs, her natural warmth healing wounds the legal system couldn't touch. The Blue House became a living, breathing testament to the idea that the people who clean the floors and drive the cars are the ones who truly keep the world running. They learned about labor rights, financial stability, and how to spot the early, subtle signs of exploitation. They learned that their honesty was their greatest asset. One quiet afternoon, Nia found Elsie sitting on the wide porch of the Blue House, drawing with thick, vibrant crayons. Elsie was happier now, her movements free, her eyes sparkling with the joy that only true safety can bring. She wasn't terrified anymore. She was thriving. Elsie held up her finished work to Nia. It wasn't a drawing of the mansion or a courtroom or a fire. It was a picture of the Blue House, standing tall and solid, surrounded by stick figures holding hands. Above the house, arching across the sky, was a giant, brilliant rainbow. "This is us," Elsie announced proudly. "The blue is where we are safe, and the rainbow is because the storm is over. Mama said rainbows only come when the sun and the rain are together." Nia knelt beside the little girl, looking at the pure, unburdened art. The rainbow was the perfect symbol. They had all been through the storm, the betrayal, the isolation, the fire, the fear, but they had survived together. The light that remained was the Blue House, a second chance for everyone. For Grace to be a mother, for Terrence to be honest, for Tasha to be a leader, and for Nia to be a hero not by accident, but by choice. Nia realized her story wasn't about the tragedy of a maid, but the triumph of truth. She never got the quiet, simple life she originally wanted, but she got something infinitely more valuable, a powerful purpose, and a family forged in fire. The controversy would eventually fade, the headlines would stop, but the Blue House, bright blue and standing strong, would remain. This story shows that the biggest power isn't always the loudest or the wealthiest. Sometimes it's the quiet courage of someone who chooses to stand up even when the world tells her to sit down. Every single person, no matter their job or background, deserves a second chance at dignity and safety. If you believe everyone deserves a second chance, like and subscribe. Together, we make sure the Conrads of the world never win. The camera finally pulls back from the bright blue house, leaving the laughter of children and the solid, permanent hope of justice ringing in the quiet neighborhood.